everyone and welcome to a slightly different type of video today. This is how I won the first ever Creators Championship. So a couple of things to go through before we get to the points. I've got 5 points that I want to get through today in terms of how I feel I managed to win the championship and what was beneficial to me during that process. So 5 thoughts, 5 things for you to take away, hopefully. Before we get to that though, a couple of things. What is the Creators Championship? It's an 8-person content creators football manager tournament where we had quarterfinals, semi-finals and a final. And the 8 content creators had to go through a draft system. They had about £200 million to spend in the draft, and they had to buy 19 players and then a 20th player that was a legend. So the leagues that we used were the top 5 European leagues, but not the top division in each of those countries, should I say. We went for championship level, so tier 2 of the top 5 European nations basically is where we chose our 19 players from, and then we had one legend that we were able to bring in for a cost, and it was a high cost compared to the other players out of our £200 million budget, but the likes of Ronaldinho and the Brazilian Ronaldo and Rio Ferdinand was chosen. Mine was David Beckham to play out on the wide right hand side. So once our legend was in place, we then had to go into the draft and choose 19 to make up a 20-man squad for under £200 million, including that legend cost. So that's the Creators Championship. The other couple of things I want to say before we get into the points that I want to bring up today is 2 things. One, just because I did these things and I won doesn't make it right or wrong. This is just my opinion and just my thought process that I want to help give to you, just as hopefully something that will help you to play your own versions of draft competitions. I think they're becoming more popular in terms of the Football Manager community, so maybe more of you will be playing it. So that's all my intention is. I'm not right or wrong, this is just what I did. And the second and last thing to say before we get into the points is just because I did these things and I won doesn't mean the other content creators in the tournament didn't do these things or didn't have better ways of doing certain aspects of the draft or the actual gameplay. It just meant that on this occasion, this is how it worked for me and I won, which was fantastic and totally unexpected from my point of view. I have played Football Manager for a very long time, and in that time never ever played anybody else in a game of Football Manager. So this was all a brand new experience to me and one that I really enjoyed. So 5 points to get through under 3 categories. The categories are pre-draft, in the draft and in the game, and we got 5 things that I either learned or I did that I think helped me win the championship. So let's get into the first one. So the first one's quite simple really, and it's know your tactic. Pre-draft, I made a decision. You can either go one of 2 ways. You can either go into the draft and just randomly pick guys that you can find and build a squad and then figure out how to play them, or you can go in with a predetermined tactic and go and find the players that fit it, and that's the route I decided to take. So I went in knowing what my systems were going to be. There's 2 of them, and I'll tell you why there's 2 of them a little bit later in another point, but for this one, what I'm going to show you is this tactic here. This was my one of my tactics, and the reason it's important is because there's got quite specific roles. A slightly deeper wide right midfielder. We've got 3 central midfielders, but 1 in each of the defensive midfield line, the central midfield line and the attacking midfield line. We've then got an attacking left winger, and we've got a striker up top. That what I wanted to do a little bit was have a target man type striker, so he can bring more players into the play from midfield rather than be a total sort of forward thinking right at the top of the pitch striker that was just going to poach the goals himself. So those were key things that I already had in mind before I knew which players I was going to bring in. This was the structure I wanted, and I felt that it was important to know that going into the draft. So point 2 was make sure that you identify enough players. So before the draft, I went into the game engine, should I say, the game itself, and had a look around at the players that we were able to buy from, and went in specifically and did my research. I had 2 things. I had a list of 19 players that I wanted as my ideal squad that fit the way that I played, and then by the side of that I had a second list which was another half dozen at least players for each of the 11 positions on the football pitch. So it meant that whatever came my way, I always had a backup to a backup to a backup to go to bring into my squad that would fit into the budget. I'd made sure the budget was working, that also it didn't matter who was chosen by other content creators. I always had somebody that could fit into the system that I wanted to play, right the way down to choice 6, 7, 8 at times, just to make sure I got the balanced type of squad that I was interested in. So it's really important to my mind, if you're going to do this competitively and be filmed doing it for content, it's worth taking the time to actually go and research the players. If you're doing it just for fun with a couple of mates, then maybe you just dive in with no understanding as to who you're going to buy and see what's around, and that's absolutely fine. But on this occasion, for me, I felt the need to do some research before I went in, and the time that I spent doing that, I think, was quite important. And it was important for one other reason also, is that when you go into the normal game, the prices of your players are going to be different to when you go into the draft mode. There's lots of reasons for that we won't go into, but make sure if you're researching your players, go and do it in draft mode, because those are the prices that you'll be doing. So I hope that makes sense, but that's the second point. So the third point comes within the draft itself, and it's this simple thought: don't get swayed by big name players. Now, 3-4 rounds into the draft, you may have got a few players in, you may be looking at others thinking I'm doing okay here, and then you spot in one of the lists, it might be a striker that hasn't gone yet, that's hugely expensive compared to a lot, or is very, very good compared to most that are there, but it isn't on your list. So don't get swayed by big name players or big price tags that you think might be a better option. You've done your research. Try and stay on focus on what you're trying to achieve in the complete nature of your squad, rather than remembering all of a sudden that there's this guy that maybe could come in and do a job just because you know him and you know that he's decent, but you didn't put him into your original list of players for a reason. So stay on target, as it were, for a Star Wars reference for anybody there. Make sure that you keep to your plan. It's really, really important. So the fourth thing to say is that, again, in the draft mode itself, when you're going through the draft, one of the things that I found was, whilst I thought that everybody coped with the draft very well in terms of other content creators, I found in myself it was really important to understand that it goes at quite a pace, but you've got a small amount of time yourself each time your choice comes round to use, and don't rush yourself. Try and stay calm in the process. Make sure you're referring to all the notes that you've made, and taking your time to make the right decisions at the right time. And one of the things that was key for me was that because I'd spotted all of the all of the other content creators bar one had chosen basically an attacking type of legend to put in their side. So the likes of Brazilian Ronaldo as a striker, for example, or Bergkamp, I think, was chosen as an attacking midfielder. So what I decided to do in the draft was go in and work on my defence first and try and get as many good defenders out of the options available to us to build a solid base from them which I can make my team work from. I knew I had Beckham to create for me and to use crosses on the corner kick specifically, but if I created a solid defence, then hopefully that would negate some of the impact some of those big legend type players would have, and I think it worked out very well for us. In the end, I got Liam Cooper and Janssen, who used to be at Leeds with Cooper, is now at Brentford, I think, but a good partnership in that central defence, and you'll see in the Championship itself, they were very, very solid for me. So those were the first couple of players that I bought into my side, and along with Colin at right back, Maxime Colin, who I thought was going to be quite helpful for Beckham to work with down that right hand side of the pitch. So those were my first 2 or 3 choices, and I thought it was really important to do that at the start of the process. But the only way I was able to do it was to stick to my notes, stick to the plan, understand the little bit of time that I'd got each time my choice came round, and actually just stay chilled out and calm and enjoy the experience. So finally we come to the first point, the number one point that I want to make really, and I think it is one of the key things that actually won me the championship. And it's the thought that in a knockout tournament where you're playing home and away through the quarters and the semi-finals, from my point of view, before we got to a neutral venue for the final, but in those quarters and semis, I went in, remember, thinking about my tactics before the whole draft even started. I went in thinking about an away tactic and a home tactic. One of the things that I'd noticed by watching things like the Streamer Showdown, for example, is that the game plays quite differently for you in this kind of context, in this kind of game mode, when you are playing away from home compared to at home. So I went in with 2 tactics. My away tactic was this asymmetric 4-3-3, 4-5-1, whatever you want to call it. And it's basically a vertical tiki-taka. And it kept the ball reasonably well. Now, in the away games that I played against ABT and against JLLL, actually, it didn't quite work exactly in the way that I thought it would. I didn't want to go in too defensive. I don't want to sit and let them just pile all the pressure on me. I want to try and put my game on them. So how we did it was we went balanced in the mentality. We went shorter passing and standard tempo. So we weren't chucking the ball long, we weren't gun-ho, but we still had a route through and a way of playing that I hoped would keep us in the game, and we would work it into the box basically, trying not to just take loads of pot shots, try and wait for the right opportunities. Now I think, if I'm right, I only lost those first away games in both of my quarters and semis, maybe 1-0 each. And I kept focus on not changing from it, even though at 1-0 down you're tempted to think maybe I'll go and try and win this and try and get back into the game. It was all about the 2 games in each tie, and the home game for me fortunately came second both times, and so it enabled me to really focus on that as a way to get back into the game. So I stayed focused on sitting in my away tactic, and it suppressed them enough. They had shots, they had a bit of possession, but they didn't always look like they were going to batter me completely. I think we stayed in the game pretty well. The next bit in transition, there was no major sense of pressing them or anything like that. I just kept shape and wanted to remain set all the way through the game for both defensive work and offensive work. We distributed to the playmaker, so this guy in the middle of the central midfield, I think it was potentially, or the deep lying playmaker, one or the other. So we took short goal kicks to do that, and out of possession, a high line and a higher defensive line. The higher defensive line is only because I think that's how Football Manager plays best, to be honest. And the higher line of engagement was because I didn't want to squeeze the play too much. I wanted routes through for us when we got the ball as well. Standard pressing, so nothing particularly impactful there. We did prevent the goal kick, the goalkeeper distribution a little bit, so occasionally we'd push up and do that, but not all the time. And it was just a solid formation with a decent shape that meant if I got the ball anywhere in this this lineup, we had routes through that we could play right the way to the top in the vertical tiki-taka style, but we also had some defensive security with a slightly narrower wide man on the right, and a couple of defensive options in the middle of the pitch, really. So that's the way I set up for away from home. It wasn't too defensive, but it just gave me a way of keeping the ball a bit and trying to stay in the game, and it suppressed the scoreline quite well. And the second one was this, the 4-2-3-1. Everybody knows the 4-2-3-1, and it's based around the gegenpress, to be honest. So it was all about trying to push higher up the pitch, win the ball higher up the pitch, and then when we got it, properly counter-attack at them and go full bore to try and get chances. So if we look through here, we're on a positive mentality. Didn't want to go too over the top with that, but we started with a positive mentality, gave us places to go. We could go further attacking if we needed to, or drop more defensive if we needed to. Stayed quite narrow. I know that we had wide men, but if we go and have a look, we've got Pacheco on the left-hand side, and he's cutting in, and we've got a supportive winger in Beckham, so he kind of cuts in a little bit here and there and lets the fullbacks overlap them. That's where the width comes in, but I didn't want to be too expansive, so we kept it quite narrow. Played out of defence because I still want to go through the team, not over the team, as it were. But we did pass into space occasionally and used a little bit of pace that we had. Another thing that I identified, that we had a bit of pace around the side. Standard directness, so we were spraying the ball around a little bit. It wasn't tiki-taka anymore. And the higher tempo, just getting at them, pushing at them, and playing at that higher level all the way through was decent. In transition, this is where we counter-pressed them in the gegenpress, and we counter-attacked them when we won the ball really quickly, still distributing from the back because I wanted to go through the team. So we kept the goalkeeping distribution short, and out of possession, much higher line on that. We stretched the play a bit, and we put a much higher line to engage them higher up the pitch. Kept the higher line, not the much higher line in defence. Standard defensive width, nothing too expansive there. Extremely urgent pressing, always after them, always pushing in, and preventing that goalkeeping distribution again. So those were the two structures of play that we had. The two formations you can see were different. The only change that I made in personnel between the two formations is at left fullback. What we had was, we had this guy who was a good, sound defensive fullback with a decent crossing as well, but a very good defensive fullback. So we played him more in this formation. And when we went into the attacking formation a bit more, we had this guy who didn't have quite the defensive qualities, but I felt was slightly better moving forward. And so he came in and played the attacking fullback role in that more attacking lineup for when we were at home. And that is really where I felt that I won the championship, if I'm honest. In that semi and the quarterfinal specifically, I suppressed the game in the away fixture, and then in the home fixture, I really went at them. I had a decision to make then in the neutral venue. Do I play the away tactic or the home tactic? By that point, it felt like the home tactic was so full of goals and so full of impact. I thought, let's go in with that, and we can always change it to the defensive later, which I think I did in the end. But that won me the final as well, going positive at that point. I didn't feel the need to suppress it anymore. I'd got further in the competition than I thought I was going to anyway. So basically that's it. That's the 5 points that I wanted to bring to your attention that I think helped me win the Creators Championship. Again, it doesn't make me right or wrong. This is just my version of it, and I hope it's useful to you. If you're going to participate in draft competitions and competitive Football Manager, have a great time doing it. Don't take it too seriously. Have a lot of fun with it. It's great when you get a good bunch of guys together to do it, and we had that. And the last thing I would say for anybody that's still watching, I'm fully aware that just at the point where I'm releasing this video, we're beginning to talk about Season 2. So Season 2 competitors that are out there, I hope you've taken the notes. I hope you've made the notes about the 5 points that I've bought. Now the question is, have I told you everything that I know? I'll leave that one to you for thinking about. Welcome to the Creators Championship, though, for those that are participating in Season 2. I look forward to defending my title. There's no guarantees that I can win again, but I'll give it a good go. I'm not going to give it away lightly. So bring it on, everybody. Thanks for joining me today, though. Thanks for watching this. I hope it was helpful and useful to you for anybody that wants to play competitive Football Manager and go into draft modes. These are just my thoughts, But as I say, I hope they were useful to you. Thank you for joining me. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Join my United City community. The more the merrier. Click that like button on this video if you can. That helps me get seen by lots of other people. Until next time though, take care of yourselves. I'll see you very soon. Bye for now.